Throughout their 50+ year history, Capcom has become known the world over for developing creative and unique fighting games. Their most popular fighting game series is Street Fighter, and with the most recent entry into the series selling millions of copies in under 6 months, it's safe to say that not only Street Fighter, but Capcom as a whole are killing it in the fighting game scene. But there's one fighting game series of theirs that has laid dormant for quite some time. First released in the 90s, Capcom's at the time brand new IP featured all sorts of fiendish ghouls and monsters fighting each other in one-on-one battles for our entertainment. Unfortunately though, Darkstalkers as a series is dead. The Darkstalkers series is comprised of 3 main entries: Darkstalkers the Night Warriors, Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge, and Vampire Savior World of Darkness, as well as various ports, collections, character appearances in crossover fighting games, and even an official anime series. The latter of the 3 main games is the most popular, and competitive play for Vampire Savior, or VSAV as fans call it, still exists today all around the world. We'll be breaking down the 3 major entries into the series, as well as the most recent entry, Darkstalkers Resurrection, to rediscover what made the series so special and to figure out why Capcom seemingly isn't open to the idea of supporting it anymore. Admittedly, I've never been a hardcore Darkstalkers player, but after meeting people who play the games religiously and run both offline and online tournaments at fighting game locals and majors, I've been inspired to finally talk about the series in detail, and I hope to demonstrate how and why it's become such a cherished series over the years. With all of that out of the way, let's begin properly and dive into the series' birthplace. Before we get ahead of ourselves, allow me to explain how Capcom even came up with the first Darkstalkers game in the first place. Buckle up, because this ride is about to get bumpy. After the release and massive success of 1991's Street Fighter II, Capcom decided to use that game's fighting engine and arcade board for a completely new fighting game. Here's where we run into problems, however. The origin of not only the Darkstalkers characters but the entire series in general is still partially unknown, although there are 2 claims that have been reported. The first claim, according to Capcom artist Akira Yasuda in the Udon art book Darkstalkers Official Complete Works, is that he had a colleague who went by the name of Katsuya Akitomo, and Akitomo was supposedly the one who created the idea of a monster fighting game. Capcom planner Junichi Ono, who worked with Akira Yasuda on Captain Commando in 1991, supposedly gave the game its initial form in the prototyping phase, and Ono claimed that the monster fighting game idea was thrown out during a staff brainstorming session. After development began, Ono became the main planner for the game, and he revealed that it originally focused on Japanese yokai before the team decided to expand the roster and include monsters and creatures from urban legends found all over the world. The second claim, by Capcom USA producer Alex Jimenez in a YouTube video titled Darkstalkers Movie Monsters Pop Facts uploaded by Game Trailers, is that Capcom was developing a monster fighting game based on Universal monsters, but Universal refused to license their IP out to Capcom, so original characters had to be made. Jimenez also claims that he created the Darkstalkers characters himself in about an hour, and that he is the true creator of the series. Personally, I'm more inclined to believe the Akitomo story, as I find it hard to believe that Capcom Japan would allow a member of Capcom USA to design an entire cast of characters for a brand new IP that they, in Japan, would be developing. But really, who knows at the end of the day? When Darkstalkers was being developed, fighting games at the time, especially Street Fighter, relied on representing different nations through stereotypes, and Capcom planner Haruo Murata expressed in the Udon art book that many arcade goers at the time didn't care about character backstories, so Murata used this lack of interest as motivation to give Darkstalkers a sense of narrative and extensive lore. In the beginning, the development team over in Japan didn't care too much about character backstories, but after receiving requests from overseas members of Capcom, they decided to lean in that direction a little bit. According to Ono in a 1994 interview by the now out-of-print Japanese gaming magazine Gamist, one reason, as you can probably guess, is that we wanted to create a new, different style of versus fighting game. In the midst of our brainstorming, someone proposed, well, why not make it all about monsters then? With monsters, we wouldn't have to create brand new characters from whole cloth, and we could use famous monster characters that people would already be familiar with. The developers also decided to incorporate new gameplay mechanics into the mix. The first of which is the chain combo, and it went on to inspire the Magic series system in future fighting games like the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Ono explained in the same interview that originally you would press two buttons together for an auto combo to play out, but the developers found this mechanic boring, so they decided to change it. Other new features include the ability to block enemy attacks in the air, the ability to walk while crouching, and a super bar, which also appeared in 1994 Super Street Fighter II Turbo. You could use your meter to perform an EX special, which was a more powerful version of one of your special moves or a full super combo. Darkstalkers' meter drains over time, however, so it rewards aggression by not allowing players to conserve meter for future use. When the game was finally released in arcades around the world in July of 1994, the game was a success, but only if you had the right mindset. According to a Japanese video titled How Darkstalkers Was Born, Katsuya Akitomo, the man who influenced character designs in Capcom, Akitomo reveals that Capcom sold 24,000 Darkstalkers cabinets, which would have made it a great success at the time. Filled with confidence due to the game's strong sales and critical acclaim, Akitomo was called into the office of Capcom CEO Kenzo Sugimoto, and once there, Sugimoto expressed his disappointment with the game's sales. His mindset was that Street Fighter II had made a staggering amount of profit for Capcom, and that future fighting games should, in theory, reach the same level of success. Despite what Sugimoto felt, the game did sell well objectively, and it was viewed by fans and critics as a great success. With a successful new IP on the table, Capcom was ready to keep it going, and they started preparing for the next evolution of the Darkstalkers series. Released in arcades around the world in 1995, Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge is the next iteration of the series, and while Night Warriors may seem like a true sequel to the first Darkstalkers, it was never treated as such. As mentioned by Funamizu and Ono in an interview, Night Warriors was seen as an update or revision to the first game, not an entirely new title. Due to this, it makes discussing the game at length somewhat challenging, as many assets from the previous game were carried over. All the stages and character endings in arcade mode remained the same, and the roster was mostly the same, except for new characters Donovan and Shenko, and previously unplayable bosses Pyron and Phobos. With that being said though, Night Warriors does contain some major new features, including a refined combo system that functions more like Marvel vs. Capcom, the ability to attack grounded opponents, and a complete revamp of the special meter. Players have access to more than one meter in Night Warriors, and instead of draining constantly, you can store the meter for when you really need it. You can also use meter to perform an ES special move, which uses a portion of meter, or an EX special move, which uses a whole bar of meter. The more meter you spend, the stronger the attack, and without the bar constantly draining, players are now encouraged to strategically manage their resources instead of using it as soon as possible. According to Funamizu, most of the game was developed in 5 months, and in video game development, that is an extremely small amount of time to do something. Sure, Night Warriors may not have been created completely from scratch with a new engine, audio, art assets, etc., but developing the game in 5 months is very impressive. As for how the new characters were created, Haruo Murata explains that Donovan was meant to be a character who hunted the Darkstalkers, but if he was just a regular human, he wouldn't stand a chance, so they made him a Dhampir, a half vampire, half human. Shenko was added out of a desire to include a new female character, and she's based on the Chinese urban legend Jiangshi, a type of hopping vampire who, during the day, kills to sustain their life force, and at night, hides away in dark places like caves or tombs. Shenko's Japanese name LEI-LEI comes from the Japanese kanji for spirit, Rei, repeated twice. It was just a cute nickname internally at Capcom at first, but when it came time to give her an official name, they decided to make their nickname her actual name. On the other side of the world, Capcom USA gave Donovan his name, and Murata also explained how their unique Western outlook acted as a major influence over the creation of Donovan. Another part of the game's development, albeit one that never made it into the final game, was the dark color character changes. If you press light punch and medium kick together, you can select your character with a darker color scheme, internally dubbed the Goki color after the Street Fighter character of the same name. The original idea was to have each character have new moves and abilities when using their dark color, but this would have simply taken too much time and work, so this idea was quickly scrapped. After the first Darkstalkers was released, the developers went back and retrospectively analyzed the game, and they realized that the combo system was too strict for most players. If you were doing a combo in the first game and didn't perfectly time your next hit, your combo would end prematurely. Upon learning how frustrating this was to most players, the developers of Night Warriors decided to make the combo system looser by providing players with a much larger window to input their next attack. After the game's short development cycle had ended, Night Warriors was released to the world, and just like the game that came before it, it received critical acclaim and strong sales. Critics agree that the new characters, changes to the combo system, and revamp of the special meter made Night Warriors not only stand apart from the first game, but also to one-up it in terms of quality. The Darkstalkers series, however, wasn't finished, as Capcom decided to not continue with revisions to the first game, but rather to create a brand new game for the next installment. The game many fans consider to be the series' peak was released worldwide in 1997, and it truly took the series to new heights. Vampire Savior, or Darkstalkers 3 which is what it was called on the PS1, wasn't ashamed to remove things that players took for granted from the previous games in order to separate itself from not only Capcom's competition in the fighting game scene, but also from the previous games in the series. A major change to the Darkstalkers formula was the addition of what's known as the damage gauge system. Instead of having rounds that end when a player loses their life bar, the action simply pauses for a second before the loser gets back up and keeps fighting. While this may not seem like a big deal, in reality, the damage gauge system doesn't regenerate health for the winner of the round, and neither player's positions are reset, so if you lose a round in the corner, you're staying there when you get back up. The structure of the rounds is one element of fighting games that's hard to change, but for this game, we didn't want the flow of the fights interrupted. The damage gauge system was originally part of a different game system. We tried inserting it here, and it turned out to be really interesting, so we kept it. Vampire Savior also has a brand new mechanic called the Dark Force system, and when pressing two buttons of the same strength with at least one bar of meter, you enter Dark Force. What Dark Force does is different for every character, and while some characters like Anakaris and Dimitri will rarely enter this mode as their new abilities granted by Dark Force just aren't worth the meter, Jeddah and Felicia, for example, will enter this mode often, as their new abilities granted to them are worth using meter. Speaking of Jeddah, he's one of the 4 new characters in the game, with the others being fan favorites Lilith, QB, and BB Hood. Thinking back to the previous game for a moment, Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge was more of an update to the first game than a true, brand new sequel, but with Vampire Savior straight up being called Darkstalkers 3 on the PS1, why did Capcom wish to develop a brand new game? Well, we'd been planning to make a sequel since we finished Revenge, but there was a feeling we had of wanting to re-evaluate, from zero, the very concept of what it means to be a monster. We have a guy on our team who we call the one-man army who does planning work, and he handed us the initial game plans for Vampire Savior. From there, we officially formed a team and got down to work. But the setting and the story came first in those plans. As for the new characters, originally, we were going to have an adult version of Anita, and Donovan who had become a vampire. As the development went on though, it felt like we weren't going to be able to do those ideas justice, so we made a big shift last September and reworked some of the character stories and lore. The truth is, since the first Darkstalkers, we'd wanted to have some kind of insect-related character. Oddly enough, it was something Akiman said that kicked everything off. Hey, if we're talking insects, why not a bee woman? He did a bunch of concept art which we all thought was really cool, but her moves and abilities, that's a whole other story. Those were very difficult. Initially, there was some kind of miscommunication about her, because the first drawing Akiman handed back to us was puzzling. I sent him a note asking, who's this supposed to be? But at the same time, Akiman was so busy with other games that he never replied. Eventually, the person who was in charge of her animation patterns again queried Akiman, at which point he realized the mistake and redrew her. The picture he sent back was great, it perfectly captured that duality of cute and psychotic that everyone knows and loves about her. After seeing that we all got carried away with making different moves and abilities for her, we did receive some criticism though. Capcom's finally gone and done it, the second series to have a Sakura incident, I guess. The phrase Sakura incident refers to how when Sakura was first introduced in Street Fighter Alpha 2, many fans of the Street Fighter series were unhappy, as they felt that she was created to pander to otakus, as well as her presence softening the hardened image of the Street Fighter series at the time. Like the two previous games in the series, Vampire Savior was released to critical acclaim and financial success. Shortly after the release of the game, Capcom put out Vampire Hunter 2 and Vampire Savior 2. These may seem like direct sequels, but they're actually just more updates with slightly different character rosters and some little gameplay changes. The future was looking bright for Darkstalkers fans after Vampire Savior came out. I mean, there were 3 successful games and a load of successful merchandise, so there really wasn't a reason for the series to go on hiatus, right? Some collections and ports over the years were released for systems like the Dreamcast, PS2, and PSP, but fans were left dreaming of a brand new entry into the series, and in the early 2010s, this dream was seemingly about to come true. After many years of speculation, and former Street Fighter producer Yoshinori Ono talking about potentially developing a brand new Darkstalkers game, the 11th of October 2012 arrived. No, not the release date of a new Darkstalkers game, but the beginning of a promised new era for the series.
Not bad. Oh my god.
During Capcom's Street Fighter 25th Anniversary Celebration panel at New York Comic Con 2012, they announced the return of the Darkstalkers series and proclaimed that it wasn't dead. No one really knew what this phrase meant exactly, but it was safe to assume that this amazing looking CGI trailer was teasing a brand new entry into the series. This video was accompanied by the reveal of a new collection, Darkstalkers Resurrection. A combo pack that contained both Night Warriors and Vampire Savior, with new features like achievements, screen filters, a tutorial mode, and perhaps most importantly, rollback netcode. Resurrection was mainly developed by American studio Iron Galaxy, who are known for their work on Street Fighter III Third Strike Online Edition, Marvel vs. Capcom Origins, and Seasons 2 and 3 of Killer Instinct. According to a now deleted forum post on Capcom's official website, Capcom USA's Senior Vice President Christian Svensson revealed that Resurrection was in active development for a year before its announcement, and it had been in the planning stages even before then. The reasoning behind having both of the second and third Darkstalkers games in one package is explained by producer Derek Neal. We were agonizing over which to release. They're the two most popular fan favorite games of the people who played Darkstalkers way back when and loved it. There's a group that loves Darkstalkers 2 and a group that loves Darkstalkers 3. While some fans were unhappy at first due to Resurrection technically not being a new game, both Iron Galaxy and Capcom worked hard to ensure that the game would satisfy fans, and the addition of rollback netcode to a digital-only 2013 fighting game speaks volumes at how ahead of its time Resurrection was. To be honest, despite the series having a large, passionate fanbase, Resurrection just kind of came and went. While the game reviewed very well, the same can't be said for its sales. Resurrection did crack the top 10 best-selling games on PSN in March of 2013, and after realizing this, fans took to the now-deleted Capcom Unity forums to proclaim that the game was doing well, but Christian Svensson returned to write the following message. Sadly, it's not as high on that list as it really needs to be successful. We're working on promotions and the like to improve the situation. We've not given up, but I'm disappointed in the opening sales response relative to any other fighting title we've put out on the same platforms given the frequency and urgency of requests we've had here over the last several years and the quality of the execution. It is the most fully featured and probably best project of this type we've done, and before people jump to the wrong conclusions, I'm not blaming fans who did buy it and supported the brand. I'm very thankful for those guys. Thank you to all of you. I'm more disappointed by my misread of the information in this particular case. Capcom's internal sales targets for the game are obviously unknown to the public, but for a Capcom employee to publicly state that Resurrection wasn't selling well, yeah, it wasn't looking good. After this information was made public, fans were not happy, and they accused Capcom of doing the classic "we'll make a new game if you buy the old one again" sales tactic that is common for re-releases of older titles. On July 23, 2013, GameSpot reported that the game's low sales were the reason for the series going on an indefinite hiatus, and days before that, on July 11th, they reported that Capcom was experiencing layoffs, with Svensson leaving the company. Some fans still had some hope for the series, but it's been nearly 11 years as of recording since Resurrection released, so it's safe to say that the series has unfortunately been laid to rest, at least for now. From its success in Japan and America with its first 3 mainline games to its eventual death with its final proper installment, Darkstalkers has seen its ups and downs. This series pushed the limits of the fighting game genre with its animation, gameplay, audio, character designs, and more, and it's very unfortunate that the series never got to take the leap into 3D. Its blend of gothic horror and frenetic gameplay caught the eyes, ears, and hearts of many, including myself, and while Capcom used to push the series heavily in the 90s and the early 2000s, Darkstalkers as a series nowadays is only relegated to cameo appearances in crossover games. With the technology that major studios like Capcom possess, one can only imagine how genre-defining and beautiful a brand new Darkstalkers game could look and play like, and I believe that a horror-inspired art style with brand new 3D models for the characters would not only breathe new life into the series, but also bring it back into relevance with the mainstream. Honestly, I really miss Darkstalkers. While I was born after Vampire Savior was released, I think combining the game's aesthetic with the cutting-edge technology of today would be really awesome, and I still have some hope for the series to make an eventual return. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a greater appreciation of the series. For Capcom, Darkstalkers may be dead, but for the fans, Darkstalkers will never die.